Hi everyone. Today we will look how we can configure port forwarding in pfSense. In this diagram, you can see how port forwarding works. Port forwarding basically allows us to expose a service, for example, web service from our server that resides inside the LAN to the interface on a firewall that is on a public IP address. So basically, this port forwarding forwards traffic on a specific port from public interface towards local interface. Uh, Port forwarding is basically used to host servers or applications that require inbound connection from the internet. Cisco calls it NAT overload or PAT, port address translation. There is a security concern when you apply port forwarding, and that is that the port that you will forward, the router will forward all the traffic towards that port. So it should be kept in mind that uh, any attack can be carried out on that specific port. And there is another issue that a single port can be forwarded to one internal host for each available public IP address at firewall. It means that if you have one IP address available at firewall, you can only forward a single port to an internal host. Similarly, if you have two public IP addresses available, you can forward those towards two hosts. And there is another important concern that port forwarding takes precedence over services that are running locally on the firewall. For example, if you're using web interface, if you have enabled web interface or SSH over the firewall, and you also forward code from the IP address that firewall management interface is using, then you will have lost the connection to firewall itself, and firewall will keep sending traffic towards the host that resides inside the LAN. So if you configure it wrongly, it can uh, it can restrict your access to firewall management web interface or SSH. Port forwarding also takes precedence over one-to-one NAT. We will talk about one-to-one NAT later on, but for now, think of one-to-one NAT as one public IP address is mapped to one private IP address. So if you have a setting that there is one-to-one NAT that involves a private IP address, then port forwarding will take precedence. And there's important thing that whenever you port forward, you create a port forward rule. There's an automatically generated firewall rule that relates to that port forward rule. So the pfSense automatically generates the firewall rule. There are two types of rules. One is port forward rule, and the other is firewall rule. When you create port forward rule, firewall automatically generates the firewall rule. And there's an important concept related to security that if you're port forwarding for management services like SSH or remote desktop, you should try to restrict the source IP addresses. For web or the service that is intended for public using, definitely you can't restrict that. But for the services that are intended to be accessed only by the uh, system admins or power users, that should be restricted with source IP address. So let's move on to a demo. Okay, let's move towards the demo. In this demo, you can see we have a Windows Server 2019 that resides inside the LAN interface. You can see its IP address. Its IP address is 192.168.1.2 and its gateway is 1.1. The 1.1 is on the LAN interface of pfSense. So traffic is basically forwarded from the pfSense firewall. And you can see that this server has a web server enabled, and it's listed on port 80. So next step is that we need to forward this service on the internet. Let's do that. This is the firewall interface, and let's see that we will need to go in firewall tab, and here we see NAT. Inside NAT, we will use the port forward tab and add a port forward rule. Here we will select destination as single host or IP address, and we will use the firewall IP address. This is actually IP address of the firewall, and in destination port range we will specify which port we want to get traffic from. This is actually port on public IP address. And in redirect target IP, we will specify the IP address of our server inside the LAN. And here we will use port 80. So you see the public IP address and port will be forwarded to local IP address and local port. And here you see filter rule association. This is selected as add associated filter rule, so it will automatically create a rule in firewall. Now we press save, and you see the port forward rule is created here, and we apply changes, and the changes are applied. And now at the firewall we see rules. You see that there's one rule that is generated automatically with the NAT rule. So basically this allows traffic from all public IP addresses towards the local IP address, that is 192.168.1.2. Now we will test if this setting works. Here we have the public IP address of the firewall, and we have port that we mapped from the public IP address to the private IP address. We click enter, and we see the service is exposed on the internet.